So good to see everyone this evening for our first quarterly gathering of the Vital Congregations Initiative. I'm Pastor Chris Miller from Trinity Presbyterian. We also have Pastor Jennifer Dawson from Parsons, who's waving. We're going to open in prayer and then going to dive into stuff this evening and try and make the best use of our time together. Okay. So, friends, would you join me in prayer? Gracious God, we give you thanks for today, for the technology that allows us to gather, even though we are in many ways very far apart physically, we are able to be near one another in your spirit and near one another in this way of meeting. And so I pray that you will be with us tonight. You will guide our conversations, our discernment, that all we do would be according to your purpose. We ask in your son's name. Amen.
Mhm.
Well, welcome. It is so good to see you all. I want to give you a little preview of our time together this evening. We're going to start with kind of a big picture overview of this year in the Vital Congregations Initiative here in John Calvin Presbytery. We're then going to spend some time in breakout rooms where we're going to give you a little conversation topic to share with some of the folks here. Those will be randomly assigned, so you won't necessarily be with folks from your own congregation, but hope and trust that it will be a fruitful time. And then we'll be moving into the specific things that we're going to be doing in this first kind of quarter, first third of 2022 of the year, and talking through those resources. At any time, if you have questions, again, feel free to jump over into the chat. You can type in your questions there. I'll be keeping an eye on that. You can also just wave at the camera and say, Chris, I've got a question. Just let me know. You can use the digital raise hand feature. If you feel so compelled, you can also just flail at the camera. That totally works as well. So any way that you want to let us know that you've got a question. Jennifer, is there anything else you want to add at this point in a brief introduction you'd like to give?
No, I'm excited to see so many people here tonight. This is a really good initiative, a good time to get started, and it'll be nice to have the time to talk to one another and get some plans in place and some motion happening. Thank you, Chris.
You are welcome. And a perfect amount of introduction so I could send the invitation link to the person who was texting me about it. Well done, team. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the big picture view for 2022 with the Vital Congregations Initiative. Maybe even a bigger picture view, the two-year process, right? The 2-year process of Vital Congregations is year 1 is about building relationships. It's about discernment. Year 2 is about action. Okay, that's the very simple overview. So if year 1 is about discernment, it's about relationships. Well, how are we going to do that? So essentially this year, if I say VCI, Vital Congregations Initiative, as having 3 big movements. Hopefully you all saw the newsletter that we sent out last week or so that talks through this a little bit, but think of VCI as having 3 big movements this year: study, assess, and celebrate. Those are the 3 big things we're going to try and do together this year: study, assess, and celebrate. You can roughly think of study as happening during the spring, assess happening during the summer, and celebrate happening during the fall. We are intentionally not going to have a whole lot of VCI stuff in November and December because, Thanksgiving and Advent and Christmas and all the things that happen there. And, we're churches and we do a lot of stuff in that part of the year. So the goal is to not ask us all to do things that are going to overwhelm us in that season that tends to be really busy. So with the idea of springtime being study, Our goal here is to help one another, to help our leaders in our congregations and the members of our congregations to learn about the Vital Congregations Initiative. Okay. So that's the big picture, right? We start this spring studying together. We'll then move to a time of assessment. I have my VCI water bottle, the one fun piece of swag I've gotten so far for doing this. We'll do study this spring, assessment in the summer, celebration in the fall. Questions about the big picture. We're going to dive in a little while. We'll dive into the specifics of what we're doing this spring. But in terms of the big picture overview, is there something you'd like to know? Questions you have? Anything I've said that just is totally confusing? All right. Then here in just a minute, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. And if you've been at a Presbytery meeting before, then you've probably done this. You'll go in there automatically. You won't have to do anything yourself. And here is the one question that I want your group to spend some time talking about. What is, and this was in the email with the Zoom link earlier today. So if you saw that and did your homework, you'll be prepared for this. What is something that is happening at your church that makes you feel excited or proud and that you would want to brag about your church doing? Okay. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good little bit of a chat with your group. We don't need to hear everything that everyone shared, but I would be interested if there was something that you shared or was shared in your group that you want to highlight or lift up in terms of, something that you're proud of, something you're excited about in your congregation. I'd love to hear it if you would share your name and what congregation you're with. Keith, Shelley, tell us.
Hi, Shelley Thomas, St. Andrew in Kimberly City. One thing that seemed to unite all of us in our group was mission, and the fact that we were all able to somehow, through the pandemic and everything else, continue or even expand our mission efforts. So we're all pretty impressed with that.
Certainly, mission is a wonderful thing for us to be proud of when we can be making a difference in our communities. That's excellent. And it's something that draws people to us as well. What's something that was mentioned? Pat.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think all of us, okay, all of us, no, okay, all of us kind of expressed that what made us impressed with what was going on was the faithfulness of the congregations that we're in and the work that they're doing in mission. And one of the churches had an outreach program of coloring pictures and inviting people in to do that, to develop fellowship. And they've had people come from outside their congregation to take part in that. And so they're kind of excited about that.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
City had 4 visitors last Sunday. And they're excited, and we were all excited for it.
That's awesome. Diane, thanks for sharing that.
They'll be too shy to share.
It's always exciting to hear the things that you are excited about. It's neat to hear the things you're proud about in the life and ministry of your congregations. And I think it's important to point out that we don't ask this question as a way of bragging, as a way of going, oh, like how neat are we? The core here is the idea that we start from our strengths, right? That the work of building and maintaining vitality is best done not from a sense of lack, not from a sense of deficiency, but from an awareness that every congregation has strength. Every congregation has things on which to build, right? And so when we say, what are you proud of? That is a beginning to taking a look at what are some of the things that our unique communities of faith have to bring, have to offer. Where do we see that sense of hope? Where do we see that sense of joy in our midst? And so as you go through this work over the coming months, the coming couple years, I really want to try and encourage you to keep that mindset in front of you and in front of your fellow leaders in your congregation, because it can be very tempting. I think, at least for me, maybe I'm totally unique in this and no one else experiences this, but for me, it can be really tempting to say, oh, look at all the places where I'm not good enough, or I'm not as good as I hope I would be. Maybe, sometimes our churches do that too, right? I know that I probably should have had a salad and not the big old pizza that I had for lunch today, right? Interpret that as you will, right? In terms of your congregational life, are there things where you go, man, I just wish we really were better at this? Well, okay, that's fine to identify those areas, and we will work together to identify places where God is calling us to grow. But we don't want to do that from a sense of self-defeatism. We want to do it from the true belief that God is calling each of our communities of faith to be vital and vibrant. And I believe, just like, tomorrow I can do better with the salad, maybe, we'll see, that we can also find places of vitality and vibrance. So let's talk about some specific things, some specific tools we want to give you to use over the next couple months. Okay. I'm going to do a little screen share here to show you something that we will be sending out by email to everyone who registered for this, and anyone that we've got an email address for, it'll be in the notices. This is don't be frightened off by the page count on this. This is a 23-page PDF that is from a larger handbook, but we're giving you the important parts for the next 3 or 4 months right now. It's called the JCP Vital Congregations First Order Resources. So there are 3 things we're going to look at. Okay. So the first thing we're giving you is, and I'm showing you them in the order that they're in the document, not necessarily the order of importance, but it just makes it easier to scroll. So the first thing in here is a prayer card. I should back up and check an assumption here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so I can actually see your faces better. If I say the phrase 7 marks of vitality, how many people, and please be honest here, this will be helpful if you're honest, how many people go, I have no idea what you're talking about if I say 7 marks of vitality? Hands up if you don't know what that is. Okay, excellent. Thank you for the honest people that said that, because I probably would have been confusing, and I'll blame a long day for that. So I'll try and do this in 3 minutes. The big picture idea here. A lot of folks will say, we want our congregation to be vital or vibrant or healthy or whatever. And the way they'll think about that is, we want to have people and money, right? How do we know we're doing good? We got more people, we have more money, right? Those are measurements, but they're not necessarily measurements of congregational vitality. One of the core assumptions of VCI is the belief that every congregation can be vital, and it doesn't matter if you're a congregation of 50 or 500, right? There is vitality found in every congregational size. You can have a gathering of 10 people that can do amazing work for God's kingdom. And you can have a congregation of 2,500 people that show up on Sunday because it's the cool place to be, but don't really believe, Not that I would ever say that people don't believe, but right, you can have that big, cool place to go, but no one's engaged in the work of the church. And so if we're talking about vitality, we're not necessarily talking about numbers. And so one of the core things of the Vital Congregations Initiative is the identification of what are called the 7 marks of congregational vitality. You do not need to write these down because it's all in the PDF that we're going to be emailing to you. Okay. The whole middle part is about the 7 marks. I'm going to drain my water bottle before this evening's over.
The water.
So it is water in there. Whoever said that. I don't know who said that. So the 7 marks is a way of looking at vitality in the life of your church that isn't based on numbers. It's not based on the assumption that you have to have a certain threshold of members before you're a healthy congregation. The idea is we look at the traits of your congregation, we look at the things you're doing, and then identify where God's calling you to go deeper. Okay. That was 2.5 minutes by my watch. Does that give you a basic sense of where we're going? Okay.
Yes.
Questions? This would be a good place to flail if you want to know more. Okay. Let's go back to the screen share. All right. Are you seeing a big green square that says section 1? Excellent. So one of the goals of the next, let's say 3 months, the springtime, roughly speaking, is to help you, your leadership, and your congregation learn about the 7 marks. That is the goal, right? Study. That is our goal for the next season of life together. And so we have 3 tools for you to use. The first tool is the simplest, and it is a congregation-facing tool that you could start using this week if you wanted to. It is a 7-day prayer card based on the 7 marks of a vital congregation. Again, I know this will be small on your screen. I'm just trying to show you basically what you're gonna get here. You are getting this PDF by email, and it'll be in the notices this week, okay? The idea is, and let me see if we can do a little zoom in here to help. Is this at all legible?
Yes.
Excellent. Yay. So the idea is that each day of the week, you ask your congregation to pray for something aligned with one of the 7 marks, right? So on Sundays, living God, we give you thanks and praise for the new things you're doing among us, for the transforming presence of Christ. Living God, by the gifts of your Spirit, help us bear witness to the risen Lord, proclaiming the good news of salvation. And then at the bottom, and then there's a closing line, living God, in the great mystery of our faith, receive us each night and revive us each day, that we may be dead to sin and alive to you through Jesus Christ our Savior. Amen. Sunday is about Spirit-filled worship. Monday, lifelong discipleship. You get the idea. 7 days, 7 marks. And this is a simple but meaningful tool that you can share with your congregation and ask them to be praying for the congregation as we begin the process of discussing the 7 marks. Okay. So tool number 1 is the prayer card. All right. Tool number 2, and this is something that I would predominantly share with the leaders in your congregation. Okay. This is something to share with session if you have a long-range planning committee or something similarly titled. Depending on how your deacons are involved in leadership, they should probably get a view on this too, right? This is 2 different breakdowns of the 7 marks, okay? So the 7 marks, again, we're going to do a little zooming here, so maybe it's legible. Number 1 is lifelong discipleship formation. And then they always give a versus, what aren't we looking for? Versus complacent Christian piety, simply teaching good morals or offering the latest programs. Number 2, intentional, authentic evangelism versus Jesus freaks. I got to say, phrase I hadn't heard in a while. but sure. Christian hypocrisy or a committee. How many have we ever assigned evangelism to a committee before? Maybe. Outward incarnational focus as opposed to inward institutional survival, closed communities. This is one of the places where you talk about, how much are we looking out to the community in which we live versus being focused inward and just surviving as our congregation. Number 4 is empowering servant leadership versus, well, that's the pastor's job, versus monopolized leadership, versus the idea that if you hire the young, energetic pastor, that it'll fix everything. I'll just let that hang there. And are we burning out our good volunteers? Number 5, spirit-inspired worship versus a self-ratifying worship, stale ritual, divorced of meaning, or consumer entertainment. Again, when we were talking about this with our leadership on Saturday at our annual retreat, also on Zoom, gotta say, not a fan of retreats on Zoom, but we have to. I made the point, this is not the worship wars, right? We're not arguing about traditional versus contemporary. VCI is not telling you need a fog machine. If you think you need one, we're not going to tell you not to, but fog machine vitality does not make. Nor a giant organ. I'll say that too, right? The world's greatest pipe organ doesn't all bring vitality either. Number 6, caring relationships versus just another social club, hypocrisy, judgment of church and religion. Number 7 is ecclesial health versus unhealthy dysfunction, toxic environments, obsolete and irrelevant buildings. BCI does not pull punches when we face look at the challenges of the church. So we have this 2-page summary of the 7 marks that would be, you can share this as I think widely as you want. Then there is basically a page on each mark that goes much deeper. And this is for you to use as well, as much as you want with your leaders. This might be a good resource for a session retreat. Take these questions as you want, right? It gives you the heading. It gives you some summary information, biblical references, objectives for that specific mark, potential outcomes for your congregation, and reflection questions, right? There is a ton here that is ready for you to take and use in your congregation, okay? So we're going to pause there because the third thing is the big meat of this, but I want to pause at this point before we dive in and see if anyone has questions about the 7 marks specifically. So we've got basically 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it, tools to help you engage with the 7 marks, right? We've got the 7 marks Bible study, or the Bible study. Spoiler alert, that's what's coming next. 7 marks prayer card that you can share out with your congregation or with a prayer group, however you'd want to use that. And then we have 2 have differing levels of detail on the marks themselves. One kind of double-sided summary sheet, and then a series of pages that give you a lot more depth and detail on the marks. The biggie, okay? If you are going to do one thing in the next 3-ish months on vital congregations, this should be it. It's in section 3 of the PDF you'll be getting. It's the 7 marks Bible study. As you might guess, it's a Bible study over the 7 marks. Okay? We're not winning any points for creative naming. This is a 7-session adult-focused study. You could certainly do it with older youth and young adults if you wanted to. Probably not, going to be great for your kindergartners. But, as far as, older youth and then as old as you want to go, this is designed to be a weekly study that you do over the course of 7 weeks. I would not have fewer than 7 sessions I think it works well as a seven session study. Robert, question.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when we got into this pandemic, we had Sunday school every morning, every Sunday morning. Can we use this as a Sunday school time? I'm not saying to permanently replace it, but would that work?
I think so, yeah. You could totally use this for a 7-week series on vital congregations. There's no reason this wouldn't be a well suited for that kind of a purpose. So if you don't have kind of a running curriculum, or you do a topical model where, you talk about something for 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months or whatever, this would be a great plug and play resource. It would work on a Sunday morning. It would work on a midweek evening study. That's probably how we'll use it here at Trinity, as something that will lead, on a Thursday night or something. No one quote me on that. It's not on the calendar yet, but that's the kind of thing that you could use. So every session, it's 1 page. These are not hard to implement sessions. So here's what is in each session. They've got an opening prayer that you can use or not. You're of course welcome to write your own stuff. Each lesson has a scripture passage and some guidance for how to incorporate that into the study, have someone read it aloud, allow time for reflection. You could certainly use, things like or similar to Lectio Divina as a way of engaging with the scripture text. There's some background information for whomever is going to be teaching the study. And then there are some suggested reflection questions for discussion with the group. There are guides for how to close the session. Okay. So again, 1 page on each of the 7 marks. Just stop screen share so we can see one another again. And Jennifer, yeah.
Well, if you don't want to do it all by yourself at your own church, the Mission and Nurture Committee of John Calvin Presbytery has set up a 7-week Lenten study on this, where we will meet on Tuesday nights at 7 via Zoom. And we'll come together as a whole group. We'll go over one of the marks of vitality, and then we'll break you off into groups. And if you're with your church group, well, your whole church group will go into its little breakout room and talk about how it applies to your specific congregation. But if you're a lone ranger just trying to do something and learn on your own, that's great too. We'll put you in another group of lone rangers, so you'll have someone to talk to and you won't be talking to yourself, and you'll be able to grow and learn and dive deeply into these marks. One of the things we've done at Parsons is I've already started during our little lesson time going over these marks of vitality to give the congregation a really good idea of what I'm talking about when we go deeper into it as time goes on. So there's a whole bunch of ways to use it. Zoom Bible study, there will be a sign-up sheet coming out in the new notices soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, the goal here is that we want to give you lots of ways that you can engage with this. And so if for your particular context, it makes more sense to be part of the Presbytery-wide study, awesome, do that. If you want to host the study yourself, awesome, do that. If you want to host it yourself and also make the Presbytery study open to your folks, so if scheduling doesn't work, awesome, do that, right? Whatever makes the most sense in your context. John, I see your hand.
Yes, am I mistaken that maybe I just can't count? Wow. Aren't there 6 Tuesdays in Lent?
Yeah, so for the Presbytery, there are 6 Tuesdays in Lent. Well done. I see you went to a high-class seminary, John. We were classmates in seminary. For those of you that didn't know that detail, I'm not just trying to be a jerk. Yeah. So there are 6 Tuesdays. There are 7 sessions. Becky, your mission and nurture, are we starting the week before? Is that right?
Yeah, it's the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday because we didn't feel like we could cram it into 6 weeks.
Right. Yeah. So the
Yep.
Presbytery study is Lent plus the
One.
or Lent plus 1. So you're, like I said, I think for me personally, we'll make the Lent option available to our folks if they want to be part of that. But then we'll probably have another time also, because schedules are busy for everybody, and the more options you can put out there, the better. Is my personal philosophy. Becky.
Do you recommend? So this was one of my questions. Is we tend to run into, and I think a lot of churches will, the scheduling of the people who are retired and don't like to drive in the dark, and the people who are not retired and still working, and so can't meet during the day. Do you think that you don't need your congregation kind of in mass to do this study? It's better. I mean, as long as you have people at it, you don't need everybody talking about the same thing.
I'll give my thought, and then Jennifer, if you want to jump in on it, of course. Yeah, I would say that I don't think there is a particular reason that everyone needs to be at the exact same study, because the goal here is not to have us marching in lockstep on something. It is to help our people, and I mean that in the broadest sense, right? To help us, the people on this call, the leadership of our congregations, and our congregations as a whole, to begin to use the vocabulary of vital congregations, to begin to think about the 7 marks. In my personal perspective is, the more opportunities we have to talk about this, the more people think about it and reflect on it, the better off we're going to be. And so if you have 2 different times and you have 2 different groups going, yeah, they're going to come up with different stuff. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Jennifer, am I off base? What do you think?
No, I think you're right, because the marks of vitality are going to look very different depending on your culture and your context. So, you're going to need all that conceptual framework to couch your marks in. So, if we know that we're talking about empowering servant leadership, it's going to look very different in my little Parsons context than in Trinity's context. But we have the same language, so we can speak about it to one another. So, yeah, take advantage of as many ways as you can of looking at it, and let it be a fruitful time. And remember, we're not in competition. We are here together as a connectional church to do Jesus's work. So we got to set aside all those pride things and ego things.
I was trying to come up with something witty to say to that, but we'll just go, that'll preach. So, and I think that's a really important point, Jennifer, right? The idea that this is all so contextual, right? Ministry is always contextual, and this kind of work is especially contextual. That the experience that any of us have, and let's name something, the experience that part of our congregation has, Becky, to use your example, right? The experience that a working, parent of little kids has of the church is going to be fundamentally different from the retired person who can volunteer 5 or 6 days a week, right? Those are very different experiences of what the church is. They probably have different expectations of what the church could or should be. And for them to each engage with these questions of vitality, you're going to come back with different conversation points. And that's part of the value, right? One of the things that I think is, one of the marks, right? Empowering servant leadership is, in some sense, right? This is again, speaking for myself, and totally possible I'm alone here, but it is scary as someone who is a professional ministry person, to say, well, it isn't up to me to figure all this stuff out, right? That this is the work of the whole church. And just because I have a perspective doesn't necessarily mean it is the right or the best perspective. Hopefully it's not wrong or terrible, but my perspective is always going to be improved when it's joined by other people's perspectives on the same thing, right? Whether that is not whether, both people in my own congregation, and as Jennifer said, all of us sharing our perspectives together. That's one of the reasons that we're doing these calls the way we are. Hopefully there'll be a time this year when we can safely all get together, be in the same physical place to have some conversation too. But, I know I'm going to learn from you all. Hopefully you learn something from me, right? But I'm going to learn from you all about how you're putting this into play, experiences you're having. And hopefully you're going to learn from one another as well. That's our hope, at least.
You might have mentioned a time, and I don't mean to put constraints or limitations on this, but could these studies be completed in about an hour?
I would think so. They're very much designed to fit within the kind of typical traditional Bible study time frame. I think you could totally do it in an hour. I think if you have a really talkative group that wants to dive deeper into these, could you take this be a 90-minute thing? Could you do it over a really long lunch? Sure. But could you do it in 45 minutes or an hour? Totally. Other questions? These are great. Thank you. Keith, fire away.
I just wanted to mention that seeing it like this, it seems a bit overwhelming.
Sure. We want to be able to give this to you they're not going to be bite-sized chunks, but maybe at least they're, just a couple courses at a time. We're not going to give you the whole buffet. And I'm not sure I should stop with the food metaphors. But the goal here, give you a takeaway. I would start, if you do one thing, focus on how to implement the Bible study. And if you don't want to do it at, having someone host it, the thought is like, I don't know who would lead it. When would we have it? All that kind of stuff. Mission and Nurture, right? Jump on that train and just say, hey, Mission and Nurture is doing it. They'll have a sign up link, send it out to your folks. And if that is what you do this spring, is get some of your folks on that Mission and Nurture study, great. Well done. Right? Start there. Then if you want to if you want to do more, then think about offering another option for the study. Or maybe you say, we're going to offer another option for the study with, folks from the congregation, or we're going to do the study just with our session, just with our elders, maybe our elders and our deacons, right? You could do it as a leadership only thing if you really wanted to, however you want to implement that. And then I would encourage you to, for the duration of the study, maybe you do this during Lent. Take that prayer card. Again, it's a 1-pager in the PDF. You could retype it up if you want to make it a different format and get it out to your folks and say, hey, we want to ask you to be praying for, during the season of Lent, would you be praying for this stuff?
I wanted to chime in with Keith because he and I we're from the same church, and I had the same thought. It seems so big. This is a big thing, and we're so small that our whole session is here tonight plus 2 others. And so it's like, how do we get everybody else on board? And I don't know. It is big.
You are doing great. I'm jumping in, Chris. You are doing exactly what you need to do. And I think Chris is, if I let him talk again, is going to give you the rest of the overview for the year. Right now, just concentrate on this Bible study, decide which way is going to work the best for you, and go for it. And don't get overwhelmed. It's conceptually large, but it's not that big in practice. So what you're going to actually do is going to be much easier than what you're going to think about.
Can we stretch that out beyond this 7 weeks? I mean, can we do like every other week and do 14 weeks?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to come and like write you a citation for studying the Bible wrong. And I'm not. Jennifer might, but I'm not. I promise.
I didn't know whether it was, if you wait 2 weeks, then you're lost. And
No, and that's the great thing, right? Because this is something that you can do on your own time frame. And, I would encourage you, if it is possible, to have it done before middle of May, that would be great, right? Because that's roughly the time frame. We don't have an exact date set yet, but that's roughly the time frame that we're going to be looking at the next step of this, right? Is kind of end of spring, early summer. But, the idea being, so if you could do this March, sometime between now and the end of April, beginning of May, right? So however that timing works for you all, and again, you could say, well, we're going to make it available to do the Lent-ish mission and nurture study. And then we're going to offer it again after Easter. You'd be pushing it to do 7 weeks, but again, offering it twice, you could do that over 14 weeks, whatever makes sense in your context. Tony, did I see your hand earlier?
Well, you sort of have answered the question that I was going to ask. Tuesday nights are really difficult for our church because our session meets Tuesdays and we have a lot of committee meetings on Tuesday evenings. So that just doesn't work for us. We have other things planned for Lent. Would it be awful if we waited till right after Easter and then went 7 weeks? That was my question. So I kind of heard the answer. You'd rather we didn't wait that long, but if that's the way it had to go, that's the way it had to go. I don't know.
Yeah. There are very few rules here. Try not to be blasphemous. Like that's kind of near the top of the list, right?
You were a little blasphemous about the organ earlier. I was going to call you a heretic, but
Well, add it to the list. So, yeah, the goal here is not that we have to be in lockstep. We don't have to all be doing it at the same time. There is a ton of flexibility in the program, and that's the intent of it. And if you end up going, oh, well, we have 1 week left on the study and now we're having the quarterly thing where we're going to talk about what we're doing over the summer. That's okay. So I'm going to do a review of what we talked about today. We're going to close and then last chance for questions and then close in prayer. Okay. That's our agenda for the last couple minutes. So as a reminder, big picture overview, year 1 of VCI is discernment. Year 2 is action in the most basic sense. So year 1, think of it in 3 chunks. Chunk number 1, 3 movements. That's probably nicer. That's what I wrote in the newsletter. Go with that instead of chunks. So movement number 1 is what we're talking about right now. That is study. And that is all you need to worry about right now. Study, helping develop the vocabulary of VCI, helping us all learn about what we're talking about, beginning to reflect on those 7 marks. Okay. Over the summer, we'll have another one of these calls sometime probably in May-ish, somewhere in there. We will give you way more warning than we did for this one. So please hear that. We'll give you way more warning. We'll have another call over the summer. We're going to be doing assessment. Okay. That there will be a number of different things for you to do with your church. You won't have to do all of them, but there are a number of different tools you can use to go more in depth about how you're seeing the 7 marks play out in your community, in your congregation. Okay. So assessment over the summer, and then in the fall, we'll be celebrating. Now, it may seem odd that we're moving into celebration before it feels like we've done anything, but I want to take you back to where we started. We begin the work of vitality with the assumption that you already have vitality in your community. You already have strength in your congregation. And one of the goals of studying and assessing is to identify the strengths that you already have, right? We start by identifying those strengths. Yes, you are going to necessarily also discern places that God is calling you into deeper relationship, right? Notice I'm not saying weaknesses, right? We're not identifying your weak points. You may have weaknesses that God doesn't care about, right? You may have weaknesses that you think, oh my gosh, we have to change. And you're going to go through this work and go, nope, that's not where we're called. That's going to stay a weakness and we're going to be okay with it because God's calling us in another direction, right? In this fall, we're going to be celebrating the strengths that you are going to be reminded of during this process. That's going to prepare us for next year. And when we'll worry about next year?
Next year.
Right? Okay. So what do you need to worry about? Bible study. Thank you. Bible study, the 7 Marks prayer card, share the 7 Marks information with your leadership, anyone else that would be helpful for them to see it. Okay. All right. When you think of questions, you can email me, you can email Jennifer, you can email both of us. We're always happy to, chat with you on the phone, bounce emails back and forth, brainstorm with you about what would work best for your church. We can join session meetings on Zoom. I think we both have done that so far. We're happy to be a resource for you. We're not going to come in and do this for you because it's not our context. And, we both pastor churches and stuff. So, we're here to support you, but it's important for you to do the work because you're the people who are in your context and you're the ones that are going to help identify those strengths and hear how God is calling your congregation into a more deeper, vibrant community of faith. Friends, it's so good to spend time with you. We are going to always try and keep these calls to an hour 15 at the most. We know your time is valuable. And so we're going to wrap up tonight. We've been recording this call. We did not record the breakout portion of it. We'll do a little trimming, and here within the next week or so, there'll be a recording of this available for leaders who weren't able to be here in the moment for the call, and we'll send that link out. And again, let us know what questions you have. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today? All right. Hey, thank you all so much for spending some of your time this evening with us. We know that there are lots of other ways you can spend your time, and I'm grateful you've spent some of it with us. Friends, let's close in prayer. Gracious God, I give you thanks for each person who is on the call today and all those who will watch it later. I also give thanks for each community of faith that is represented by them, each congregation, each part of your body that is here in this corner of the world. As we go about the work of building more vital and vibrant communities, we know that there's already so much strength, so much hope. Help us see it. Help us embrace it, that all we do may be pleasing in your sight. God, I ask that as we leave this common time and space together, if we have traveled to take us to our homes, or if bed is just a few steps away, however long that journey might be, keep us safe. Give us nights of rest, dreams of peace, and strength to rise tomorrow and once again walk on your path, sharing your good news with the world. Be with us this day and all our days, we pray. Amen. Thank you all so very much. Have a blessed evening, and we can't wait to hear how it goes.